crested over the sleepy rooftops when my eyes fluttered open. For a few seconds, I simply lay there, cocooned in the familiar warmth of my bed, listening to the soft hum of the ceiling fan above me. There was a peculiar stillness in the air, the kind that comes only on certain rare mornings, when something monumental waits at the end of the day. Today was monumental. I glanced at the clock. 6:12 a.m. Far earlier than I needed to be awake, but my mind was already racing. My daughter, Emily, was graduating from high school today. My little girl, the baby I once cradled in trembling arms, terrified I'd drop her. The toddler who toddled into my bedroom at ungodly hours, demanding pancakes and cartoons. The child who clutched my hand on her first day of kindergarten, her fingers sticky from the strawberry jam toast she insisted on eating in the car. And now, she was 18, radiant, ready to step into a world that would either cradle her dreams or test them mercilessly. I sat up, letting the morning light spill across my lap. My phone buzzed, a text from Emily. Emily, morning, Mom. Don't cry too much today, okay? Love you. The corners of my mouth lifted into a bittersweet smile. Crying was inevitable. I'd probably start the second I saw her in that navy blue cap and gown, tassel swinging, the gold honor cord draped proudly across her shoulders. My husband, Daniel, stirred beside me. He mumbled something incoherent and rolled over, facing away. Lately, he'd been off, distant, always busy, always preoccupied. I told myself it was work stress. He'd been swamped at the firm, but the silence between us had started to stretch thin, like fabric pulled too tight. Morning, I said softly, hoping to coax some warmth from him. MMH, came the non-committal reply. A small part of me bristled, but I pushed it aside. Not today. Today wasn't about us. Today was about Emily. By 7 a.m., the kitchen was alive with the smell of cinnamon and coffee. I whisked batter for her favorite breakfast, French toast with powdered sugar, while the coffee maker gurgled in the background. The scent reminded me of Christmas mornings, of Saturdays when Emily would sit on the counter, swinging her legs while Daniel told her silly stories about talking cats and magical forests. I was plating the French toast when Emily came downstairs, her long brown hair still damp from a shower, wearing her old hoodie and leggings. Morning, graduate, I said, unable to hide the pride in my voice. She grinned, sleepy-eyed but beaming. Morning, Mom. We sat together, eating quietly, a comfortable silence between us. Daniel joined us a few minutes later, dressed in jeans and a crisp shirt, his hair neatly combed. He kissed Emily's forehead but didn't meet my eyes. I noticed. I always noticed, but I pretended I didn't. Round 9 o'clock, Emily disappeared upstairs to get ready. The ceremony wasn't until noon, but she wanted time to curl her hair, do her makeup, and, as she put it, mentally prepare for the million pictures you and Dad are going to force me to take. I laughed, promising not to overdo it. With Emily upstairs, the kitchen felt quieter, heavier. I poured myself another coffee, leaning against the counter. You okay? I asked Daniel, keeping my tone light. He looked up from his phone, startled, like I'd caught him in the middle of something. Yeah, fine. Just a lot on my mind. I nodded, though his voice had that clipped edge I'd been hearing too often. Well, let's just enjoy today, okay? Of course, he said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. By 11 o'clock, Emily emerged, and I swear my heart skipped a beat. She was breathtaking, her gown perfectly pressed, cap balanced, Atop those soft waves of hair, makeup subtle yet glowing, she looked like the young woman she'd become. But in her smile, I still saw the little girl who once needed me to tie her shoes. "Oh, honey," I whispered, my voice trembling. "You look—" Words failed me. She laughed, hugging me. "Don't cry yet, Mom. Save it for the ceremony." Daniel joined in the compliments, snapping a few photos on his phone. The tension from earlier seemed to melt, at least for the moment. The drive to the school was filled with light chatter. Emily talked about her friends, her excitement for college, and her plans for the summer. I clung to every word, memorizing her voice. The way her eyes sparkled. In the rearview mirror, I caught Daniel staring out the window, lost in thought. The school parking lot was a sea of cars and families. Parents lugged cameras, balloons, and bouquets. Graduates adjusted caps and hugged friends. The air buzzed with joy, pride, and the faint scent of fresh flowers. We found our seats in the packed auditorium. Emily disappeared backstage with her class, and I settled in, clutching my camera like a lifeline. The stage was decorated with banners in the school colors, and a huge screen displayed a slideshow of childhood photos submitted by parents. When Emily's baby picture appeared, her chubby cheeks smeared with chocolate cake, my eyes instantly welled. The ceremony began. Names were called, speeches were made. Applause thundered. Each moment swelled my chest with pride. I clapped until my palms stung. And then, there she was, my daughter, Emily Grace Thompson. She walked across the stage with poise, shaking hands with the principal, holding her diploma aloft as the audience cheered. I stood, clapping harder, my voice breaking as I shouted her name. It was perfect. At least, for a moment, because I didn't know that this was the last time my family would ever feel whole. When the ceremony ended, families poured out into the sunny courtyard for photos. Emily ran toward us, laughing, her cap in hand. Daniel hugged her, whispered something in her ear that made her smile. But then, almost imperceptibly, his expression shifted, serious, focused, as if he'd made a decision in that instant. "Let's get one more photo," he said, motioning toward a nearby podium set up for announcements. Emily groaned good-naturedly. "Dad, enough photos." But he was already stepping forward, speaking to one of the school staff. A minute later, a microphone screeched to life, drawing everyone's attention. I frowned, confused. What on earth was he doing? And then he began to speak. I didn't know it then, but that moment, the one about to unfold, would splinter my life into two parts. The before and the after. Asterisk. The courtyard shimmered in the midday heat. The smell of freshly cut grass and bouquets of lilies drifting through the air. Families bustled around us, snapping pictures, laughing, calling out to graduates. Emily had just posed with her best friends, their arms thrown around each other, caps in one hand, diplomas in the other. Daniel stood beside me, phone in hand, but his body was unnervingly rigid. His gaze wasn't on Emily or the crowd, it was fixed on the podium across the way, where a small sound system still hummed faintly from the ceremony. I watched his jaw tighten, the muscle ticking in that familiar way it did when he was working up to something unpleasant. "Daniel," I asked softly, touching his arm. He didn't look at me. "I'll be right back." His voice was clipped, almost mechanical. Before I could press him, he strode toward the podium, weaving through clusters of chatting parents and teachers. My brow furrowed. Why would he? "Dad, where are you going?" Emily called after him, puzzled. but he didn't answer. The courtyard's chatter began to dim as people noticed him climbing the small set of steps to the stage. Daniel moved with a sense of purpose, almost rehearsed. He leaned toward the man in the suit. Principal Harrison murmured something. I saw Harris's eyebrows rise, a flicker of uncertainty passing across his face, but after a pause, he nodded reluctantly and gestured to the microphone. My pulse quickened. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The microphone let out a high-pitched squeal, making several people wince. Heads turned. Conversations faltered. The hum of the crowd fell away until there was only the rustle of fabric, the occasional cough, the faint flutter of flags in the warm breeze. Daniel adjusted the mic. Hello, everyone. His voice boomed through the speakers, oddly steady yet carrying an undercurrent I couldn't place. Emily and I exchanged a confused glance. He paused, glancing down briefly before scanning the crowd. I just wanted to take a quick moment to say something personal. A few chuckles rippled through the crowd, assuming maybe he was about to give a proud dad speech. I felt heat creep into my cheeks. This wasn't like Daniel. He hated public attention. I know today is about celebrating our kids, he continued. But sometimes life hands you moments when the truth just needs to be spoken. A subtle unease began to thread through the air. My chest tightened. He swallowed. So here it is. I'm leaving my wife. The words slammed into me like a physical blow. I actually staggered back a step. For a heartbeat, the courtyard was silent utterly. Shockingly silent before an audible gasp swept through the crowd like a wave. Emily froze beside me, her mouth falling open. What? She whispered, barely audible over the sudden murmur of voices. Daniel pressed on, his eyes fixed somewhere above the audience, as if looking directly at me would be too much or maybe too human. We've been unhappy for a long time. This isn't sudden. It's not about today or Emily's accomplishment. I just think. His voice wavered slightly before regaining its firmness. I just think it's time to stop pretending. My face burned, a mixture of humiliation, fury, and disbelief. The whispers around me grew louder. I caught fragments. Did he just? At her daughter's graduation. What kind of man? Emily clutched my arm. Her voice trembled. Mom, make him stop, please. I wanted to scream. I wanted to charge up to that podium and rip the microphone from his hands. But my legs felt like stone. The shock had rooted me in place. The absurdity of it, the cruelty made my mind refused to fully process what was happening. Daniel took a deep breath. I know this isn't the right setting. A bitter laugh erupted from somewhere in the crowd. But I needed to be honest. I've met someone else, and I owe it to myself and to her to move forward. Her. The word sliced through me. It wasn't just that he was leaving, it was that he was leaving for someone. My husband of 20 years had chosen the most public, humiliating moment possible to announce an affair. Emily's hand slipped from my arm. She stared at him, eyes glassy with shock. Dad, how could you? A hush fell again at her voice. Daniel faltered, his gaze flickering toward her for the first time. For a split second, guilt shadowed his expression, but it was gone as quickly as it came. This doesn't change my love for you, Emily, he said into the microphone, his voice softer now. You're my daughter. Always will be. Emily shook her head slowly, tears welling up. Not like this, she whispered. I found my voice then, though it felt like dragging it up from the bottom of a deep, cold lake. Daniel, stop this. Now. My words were low, but the venom in them was unmistakable. The crowd was no longer just watching, they were judging. Parents shifted uncomfortably, some averting their eyes, others staring openly at the unfolding disaster. A few even raised their phones, filming. Principal Harris stepped forward, clearly uncomfortable. Perhaps this conversation would be better held privately. But Daniel lifted a hand. I'm almost done. He looked straight at me, now finally meeting my eyes. His expression was unreadable, part defiance, part something darker. I'm sorry, Claire. I can't keep living a lie. You'll thank me someday for being honest. It was the final insult, this notion that I would someday thank him for shattering our family. In front of hundreds of people, a hot rush of rage burned away the last of my shock. My legs moved before my brain caught up. I strode toward the stage, weaving through stunned parents and graduates, my heels clicking sharply on the concrete. The murmurs swelled as I climbed the steps. I didn't touch the mic. Instead, I stood beside him, close enough for only him to hear. My voice was low, cold, and deliberate. If you think this little stunt is going to break me, you've underestimated me. He stiffened, his fingers tightening on the mic stand. I'm just telling the truth. I cut him off. No, you're trying to humiliate me. But all you've done is tell this entire community exactly what kind of man you are. His jaw clenched. A flicker of something fear passed over his features. I turned to the crowd then, my voice louder, steadier. I'm sorry you all had to witness this. I know today is about celebrating our kids. That's what I came here for. And that's what I'm going to keep doing with or without my husband. The applause that followed wasn't raucous, but it was real. It was for Emily, and maybe a little for me. Daniel's face darkened, the control of the narrative slipping from his grasp. He leaned toward me, his voice a hiss only I could hear. You think you've won. You have no idea what's coming. I stepped back, keeping my eyes locked on his. Neither do you. And then, without waiting for his reply, I walked off the stage, back to where Emily stood. She was shaking, tears slipping down her cheeks. I wrapped my arms around her, shielding her from the dozens of curious eyes watching. The crowd began to disperse, some whispering, others deliberately looking away. Daniel remained on the stage for a moment longer, gripping the podium as if deciding whether to say more. In the end, he didn't. He stepped down and disappeared into the throng without another word. Emily pulled back slightly, her voice hoarse. Why would he do this here? Today of all days. I brushed a strand of hair from her face. Because he's a coward, and cowards mistake cruelty for courage. Her lip trembled, but she nodded. I don't want to see him right now. You won't have to, I said, glancing toward the parking lot where I'd last seen him vanish. We stood there for a few moments, the noise of the courtyard returning to normal around us, laughter, camera shutters, congratulatory shouts, life moving on, even when yours felt like it had cracked open. I forced a smile for Emily's sake. Come on, graduate. Let's take some photos. The good ones, the ones we'll actually want to remember. She hesitated, then gave a small nod. We found her friends, posed for silly and serious shots, and for brief pockets of time. We even managed to laugh. But beneath it all, a storm was brewing in me, a storm Daniel had no idea was coming. Because he thought this was the end of our story. But it was only the beginning. The applause and laughter of other families followed us like a cruel echo. As we made our way toward the parking lot, Emily's heels clicked unevenly on the pavement. She was walking too fast, her shoulders rigid. My own breath felt shallow. as if the weight of the air had doubled. Behind us, I could still hear scattered voices murmuring, "I can't believe he said that." In front of everyone. Did you hear? Every syllable scraped against my raw nerves. I kept my arm looped around Emily's, trying to anchor her, trying to anchor myself. Daniel was nowhere in sight. I didn't know if he'd gone to the car or disappeared entirely, and at that moment, I didn't care. My only priority was getting Emily somewhere safe, somewhere quiet, away from the public circus. We reached the car first, our car, and I unlocked it with trembling fingers. Emily slid into the back seat without a word, leaning against the window. I stood outside for a moment, scanning the crowd for Daniel. Nothing. I debated whether to wait or just leave. My pulse was still racing, adrenaline making my hands twitch. That's when I saw him emerging from behind the school building, phone pressed to his ear, talking in low, urgent tones. His expression was tight, defensive, but the way his eyes darted when he spotted me told me everything. He wasn't talking to a coworker. He ended the call quickly, shoving the phone in his pocket, and walked over. "Let's go," he said flatly, sliding into the passenger seat. I didn't move for a second, my hands gripping the steering wheel before even sitting down. "No. You drive," I said. He frowned. "What? I can't be behind the wheel right now. Not after what you just did." My voice was sharp, colder than I intended, but I didn't care. With a sigh, he got back out and walked around to the driver's side. The ride home was suffocating. Emily kept her eyes glued to the passing scenery, her reflection in the glass, pale and unreadable. I sat in the passenger seat, hands clasped tightly in my lap, my gaze fixed on the road ahead. Daniel gripped the steering wheel at 10 and 2, the tendons in his hands taut. No one spoke for the first 5 minutes. Finally, Emily broke the silence. "Why?" Her voice cracked on the single word. Daniel glanced at her in the rearview mirror. "Emily, no. Don't Emily me. Why did you do it there? In front of my friends, my teachers, everyone." He exhaled slowly, his eyes flicking to mine before returning to the road. "Because it was time." "That's not an answer," she snapped, surprising me with the edge in her voice. I didn't want to hide it anymore. He said, his tone maddeningly calm, "We've been living a lie for years. You thought ruining my graduation would be the perfect opportunity." She cut in. "Do you have any idea how humiliating that was?" Daniel's jaw worked, but he didn't respond. I turned in my seat to face her. "Emily, this is not your fault. Not even a little bit." She looked at me, eyes glistening. "No, it's not my fault, Mom. But he made it about me. In front of everyone." Daniel's voice rose slightly. "I didn't make it about you. You did," I said sharply, cutting him off. "You made a spectacle of our family at a moment that was supposed to be hers. That's not honesty, Daniel. That's cruelty." He clenched his jaw, said nothing. The rest of the drive passed in heavy silence. When we pulled into the driveway, Emily got out without waiting for the car to stop fully and went straight into the house. The screen door banged behind her. I stayed in the driveway for a moment, watching her disappear inside. Daniel killed the engine but didn't move. "You think I'm the villain here," he said finally, staring at the dashboard. "You're not the villain because you want to leave," I said, my voice low. "You're the villain because of how you did it. You didn't just leave me. Daniel, you tried to humiliate me. You tried to make sure I had an audience for my worst moment." "It's exactly what happened," I said. getting out of the car before he could finish. Inside, Emily's bedroom door was closed. I knocked softly. "It's me, honey." A muffled "come" followed. She was sitting cross-legged on her bed, still in her gown, cap tossed aside. Her makeup had smudged from tears. I sat beside her, brushing her hair back from her face. "I'm so sorry," I whispered. She shook her head. "Why did he have to do it that way? If he wanted to leave, fine. But today, because your father's lost his sense of decency," I said. "And that's on him, not us." She leaned against me, and I held her until her breathing steadied. In the kitchen, Daniel was pouring himself a drink bourbon, though it wasn't even 3 p.m. "We need to talk," I said, stepping into the room. He didn't look up. "We've been avoiding this for years, Claire. You know it." "What I know," I said, voice shaking with controlled fury, "is that you've been having an affair. I saw the way you were on the phone today. I heard you say her." His eyes flickered guilt, then defensiveness. "Her name's Lisa. And yes, I've been seeing her for 6 months." I let out a bitter laugh. 6 months. That's all it took to throw away 20 years? He slammed the glass down. "Don't act like our marriage was perfect. We haven't been happy in years. That doesn't excuse what you did," I shot back. "Or how you did it. You could have told me privately. You could have spared Emily. But you didn't. And you know why. Because you wanted control of the story. You wanted to make me look small." His nostrils flared. "You always have to be the victim, don't you?" "No, Daniel," I said quietly. "You made me the victim today. But I'm not staying in that role for long." From the hallway, I noticed movement. Emily, standing halfway down the stairs, frozen. Her expression was a mix of sadness and disgust. "How long were you listening?" I asked gently. "Long enough," she said, her voice brittle. "I'm going to stay at Aunt Maggie's tonight." Daniel stepped forward. "Emily, you don't need to." "Don't talk to me," she said, stepping back. "Not right now." Her words hit him harder than anything I'd said all day. By 7 p.m., the house was silent. Emily had packed a small bag and left with Maggie, promising to text me when she got there. I stood at the kitchen sink, rinsing out a coffee mug I didn't even remember using. Daniel sat at the table, scrolling aimlessly through his phone. The chasm between us felt like miles. "You think this is the end?" I said finally, without looking at him. He glanced up, wary. "Isn't it?" I dried the mug slowly. "No, this is the start. You humiliated me in public, Daniel. You dragged our daughter into your mess. You made sure there were witnesses." His voice hardened. "What are you saying?" I met his gaze, my own steady. "I'm saying you have no idea what you've set in motion." That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, replaying the scene over and over. The squeal of the microphone, the gasps, Emily's trembling voice. In the darkness, memories of our early years crept in uninvited. The night we met at a mutual friend's dinner party, when he'd made me laugh so hard my cheeks ached. The first apartment we'd shared, cramped but full of hope. The day Emily was born, when he'd held her with tears in his eyes. I clung to those memories for a moment, then let them go. They didn't belong to the man who stood at that podium today. That man was a stranger. And strangers, I realized, could be dealt with by dawn. I knew 2 things for certain. 1. I was done begging for explanations or decency. 2. Daniel was about to learn what it felt like to be blindsided in public. The house had never felt so large, so hollow, so utterly indifferent to my existence. Emily had gone to her friend's post-graduation party, claiming she needed a little space to breathe. I didn't blame her. The day had been heavy enough for me, and for her it had been nothing short of shattering. She'd been looking forward to her graduation for years, and her father had chosen it as the stage for his betrayal. Now, she was carrying a weight no 18-year-old should have to carry, and as her mother, I could only imagine how she would remember this day forever. There would be the cap and gown, and his announcement. Daniel had gone out as well, saying he needed air, though we both knew he wasn't stepping out to clear his head. His phone had lit up twice before he left, Lisa's name flashing like a neon sign in my mind. I didn't say anything. I didn't ask. Not because I didn't want to, but because I wanted him to think I was still in shock. I wanted him to think I hadn't yet gathered the pieces of the puzzle he'd scattered all over my life. The kitchen clock ticked loudly, each second sharp against the suffocating quiet. I sat at the table, staring at the worn oak surface, my fingers tracing the faint scratches from years of family dinners, art projects, and late-night homework sessions. These scratches were memories, carved into the very furniture by the family we used to be. Now they felt like ghosts. I tried to imagine what Daniel was doing at that exact moment. Was he with her? Was he laughing, free from the tension of our home, convinced he was stepping into something better? I could see him smiling, head tilted toward her, the way he used to tilt it toward me when we were young. The image burned my chest like acid. The kettle whistled, startling me. I'd put it on without even realizing. A muscle memory born from hundreds of evenings making tea while waiting for him to come home from work. I poured the hot water over a bag of chamomile, watching the steam curl upward. It struck me how even the smallest rituals had become betrayals of their own, reminders of a life I had carefully, lovingly built with a man who no longer wanted to live it. I sipped slowly, trying to slow my breathing. My mind kept circling the same thought. He thinks I'm broken. He thinks I'll just fade into the background while he builds a shiny new life with her. Not yet. My phone buzzed. It was Emily. A simple text. I'm staying over at Jenna's tonight. Love you. I typed back quickly. Love you too. Always. I hoped she felt that through every letter. She needed to know she still had one parent who wouldn't walk away. After she confirmed she'd arrived safely, I set my phone down and walked to the living room. The couch still held the throw pillow he used for his late-night sports watching sessions. His jacket was draped over the armrest, as if he'd just stepped out for a moment. The sheer normalcy of it infuriated me. How could everything look the same when everything had changed? I turned on the lamp in the corner, bathing the room in soft yellow light, and sat down with a notebook in my lap. If Daniel thought I would dissolve into quiet resignation, he was mistaken. I began to write, not letters to him, not diary entries for my own heart, but notes, facts, patterns. Things I had noticed in the past 6 months. The late nights, the evasive explanations, the sudden interest in networking events, the quiet smiles at his phone. Then I wrote her name, Lisa. It sat there on the page like a challenge. I didn't know much yet, but I knew enough. She was younger, maybe mid-30s, worked at his firm, and had been divorced for 2 years. I'd seen her once at a company holiday party. Her laughter a little too loud, her hand lingering a little too long on Daniel's arm as she thanked him for a glass of champagne. I remembered feeling a flicker of something then, something I'd brushed off as insecurity. Now I knew better. I flipped to a new page. This one was for questions. How long had they been together? Who else knew? Did she know he was planning to humiliate me in front of our daughter? It wasn't just anger driving me, it was the gnawing need to understand, to see the whole picture before I decided my next move. By the time I heard the front door creak open, it was almost midnight. I quickly closed the notebook and set it on the coffee table, draping a throw blanket casually over my lap as if I'd been watching TV. Daniel stepped inside, looking worn but satisfied. The satisfaction was subtle, the kind of thing you'd miss if you weren't looking for it. But I was. "Hey," he said, his tone neutral. "Hey," I echoed, keeping my voice steady. "Emily home?" "She's staying at Jenna's," I replied, my eyes on the TV even though it was muted. He nodded and hung his jacket. "Big day. Lot of emotions. I think it's good she's with her friends." I wanted to ask if he'd been with Lisa, but I didn't. Instead, I gave him a tight smile. "Yeah, good for her." For a few moments, we existed in a strange, brittle bubble, him sitting in his recliner, me curled on the couch, both pretending we were simply unwinding after a long day. Then, he spoke, casually, as if mentioning what he'd picked up at the grocery store. "I'll be moving out by the end of the month." The words were a punch, but I didn't flinch. I had already known. He took my silence as acceptance, nodding slightly before turning his attention to his phone. I studied him. The man I had loved for over 20 years sat in front of me, scrolling through whatever messages were waiting for him. Messages, no doubt, from her. And in that moment, something inside me hardened. This wasn't just about a failed marriage. This was about dignity, about the years I had invested, the sacrifices I had made, the home I had built brick by brick while he climbed his career ladder. If he thought he could simply walk out and start over without consequence, he was going to learn otherwise. I excused myself and went upstairs, closing the bedroom door quietly behind me. I retrieved the small fireproof lockbox from under the bed and set it on the desk. Inside were the documents I'd kept meticulously organized. Bank statements, mortgage records, tax returns, retirement accounts. I had always been the one who kept track of our finances. Daniel thought I did it because I enjoyed organization, and I did, but now that habit was going to serve a different purpose entirely. I scanned through the accounts, noting transfers I didn't recognize, small withdrawals that didn't fit his usual spending patterns. Each irregularity was a breadcrumb, and I planned to follow every single one. By the time I slid the papers back into the box and locked it, I felt calmer. Not because I wasn't angry, God. I was furious, but because I had a plan forming, piece by piece, in the quiet of my mind. When I returned downstairs, Daniel was still in his chair, head tilted back, eyes closed. The phone was balanced on his chest, its screen dark. I stood there for a moment, watching him. He looked peaceful, almost boyish in his sleep. It was a cruel trick of the heart that the same face I had kissed thousands of times could also be the face of my deepest betrayal. I turned off the lamp and left him there, sleeping in the chair, while I went upstairs to bed. Tonight, I would rest. Tomorrow, I would start gathering what I needed, because the silence before the storm was ending, and Daniel had no idea just how fierce the storm was going to be. Morning light crept through the blinds in thin slats, striping the bedroom walls like bars. I'd barely slept, my mind a restless tide of images. Daniel's half smile as he spoke of moving out, the flicker of Lisa's name on his phone, Emily's hurt eyes at graduation. The clock read 6:17 a.m., but it didn't matter. Sleep wasn't coming back. I slipped from bed quietly, careful not to wake him. He'd eventually wandered up sometime in the early morning, the faint scent of whiskey on his clothes, In the hallway, I paused outside Emily's empty room. Her bed was neatly made, the air still holding the faint trace of her lavender shampoo. I ached to see her, to tell her that no matter what Daniel did, I was here, always in the kitchen. The kettle whistled again, its sound now like a signal, a reminder that some parts of my life were still under my control. I made my tea and sat at the table with my notebook. Today's goal was simple: follow the trail. I started with his calendar. 4 years. Daniel had left his work schedule synced with the shared family account. A quick glance at my phone confirmed he hadn't disabled it. Sloppy, or maybe arrogant, enough to think I wouldn't check. I scrolled through, finding recurring late client meetings every Thursday for the past 6 months. Conveniently, those nights often ended with him coming home smelling faintly of cologne, as if he'd reapplied it for someone else's benefit. I highlighted them in yellow in my notes. The pattern was obvious, and my pen moved faster as I linked them to certain credit card charges. Boutique restaurants, wine bars, the kind of places we used to go before Emily was born. There was more small hotel charges, never on weekends, always midweek, always the same to places. It was brazen, really, how open it all was once I looked with the right eyes. He wasn't hiding as much as he was confident. Confident that I wouldn't see. Confident that I wouldn't do. I decided to change that by 9. I had showered, dressed, and printed every piece of evidence I'd found. I slipped the papers into a folder and locked it in my bag. My next stop was someone I hadn't seen in years but who, once upon a time, had been my ally in more ways than one: Martha Klein. Martha wasn't just a friend. She was the kind of woman who knew how to make things happen quietly. She'd been through her own brutal divorce a decade ago and had come out not just whole, but thriving. She understood leverage. She understood patience. And she owed me. When I arrived at her office, a tiny but fierce legal consulting firm, the receptionist smiled politely. "She's expecting you." Inside, Martha stood from her desk, arms outstretched. "Claire, my God, you look like a woman who's got something to say." I hugged her tightly. The kind of hug where your fingers dig in just a little. You could say that. We sat, and I laid the folder between us. "Daniel is leaving." For her expression didn't flinch. She'd seen worse. "Do you want to burn it all down? Or do you want to win quietly?" I thought for a moment. "Both." She smiled, leaning back in her chair. "Now that's my girl." For the next 2 hours, we went over everything: finances, property, possible custody concerns with Emily heading to college soon. Martha explained what could be done legally, what could be done less legally. I didn't commit to anything yet, but I left her office feeling armed, my mind sharper, my spine straighter. By the time I got home, Daniel was gone again. The note on the counter was short: "Dinner with a client. Don't wait up." But I wasn't waiting anymore. The first step in any performance is preparing the stage. I spent the next week quietly moving through the house like any other wife, in her final month of shared living. But every move I made was deliberate. I began separating my finances, opening a new account in my name alone. I moved small valuables to a safety deposit box, a locket from my grandmother, the pearl earrings Daniel had given me on our 10th anniversary. Not because I valued the memory anymore, but because I wasn't about to let Lisa wear them. I kept my tone warm when Daniel was home, even casual. If he noticed my unusual calm, he didn't mention it. Perhaps he mistook it for defeat. Perhaps he wanted to believe I was quietly accepting my fate. Emily returned home for a night midweek, and I made her favorite lasagna. She picked at it, her mind elsewhere. Mom, have you and Dad talked? I met her eyes. We've discussed some things. She gave a sad little laugh. You mean he's told you about Lisa? The name fell from her lips like poison. My fork paused halfway to my mouth. You knew. I saw them, Mom, at the mall in April, holding hands. She swallowed hard. I didn't want to tell you. I thought maybe. I don't know. Maybe I imagined it. I reached across the table, covering her hand with mine. You didn't imagine it. But you need to know this is not your fault, and it's not going to break us. Tears welled in her eyes, but she nodded. That was all I needed to know. She believed me. When she left for Jenna's again, I sat in the kitchen, the low hum of the refrigerator the only sound. My plan needed to not just protect me, it needed to show Daniel that walking away wouldn't be the easy, romanticized leap he thought it would be. The following Friday, I booked a table at Monroe's, a dimly lit, high-end restaurant Daniel favored for his client dinners. I dressed in a simple black dress, my hair down, makeup done with precision. I wasn't there to see him, I was there to be seen. And I was. Midway through my second glass of wine, I spotted them, Daniel and Lisa, tucked into a corner booth. Her hand rested lightly on his, her smile syrup sweet. He froze when he saw me, his fork halfway to his mouth. I raised my glass in a polite, almost bored acknowledgement, then turned my attention back to the gentleman sitting across from me, an old friend from college. Conveniently single, conveniently charming, and conveniently aware of exactly why he was here. We laughed, we clinked glasses, and every so often, I let my eyes drift toward Daniel, just enough for him to catch me. When I finally stood to leave, I passed their table. Daniel, I said smoothly, lovely to see you. And you must be Lisa. Her smile faltered just a fraction. Yes, we've met, haven't we? Briefly, I replied. Well, enjoy your evening. The click of my heels on the marble floor was the sweetest sound I'd heard in months. That night, Daniel came home later than usual. He didn't say much, but his eyes followed me as I moved through the kitchen. He'd felt the shift, I could see it. He knew I wasn't playing the part he expected. Good, because the play had just begun. It began with small things. A call that went unanswered. A meeting Daniel swore he attended, but the GPS history on his phone, thank you, shared family account placed him somewhere else entirely. He didn't know I was still tracking it. He didn't know that every step he took now lived in a private file tucked away on my laptop. The weekend after my appearance at Monroe's, he was tense. Even his morning coffee routine, usually mechanical, was jerky, impatient. He drummed his fingers against the counter while the machine gurgled. You've been busy, he finally said, not looking at me. I sipped my tea. Haven't we? Both. His eyes flicked up, sharp. But before he could say anything, Emily walked in, hair in a messy bun, wearing one of my old college sweatshirts. She smiled faintly at me, then turned to him. Dad, can we talk? His jaw tightened, but he nodded. They stepped out to the porch, and through the thin curtain I caught fragments Emily's voice, calm but firm, saying words like loyalty and trust. Daniel's, low and defensive. Something about complicated and you don't understand. When they came back in, Emily's face was pale but set. She kissed my cheek and whispered, he's not even denying it anymore. Then she was gone again, off to Jenna's, her shoulders tense. That was the first real crack. Not mine, his. The second came a few days later, in the form of Martha's phone call. "I've been digging," she said, her voice almost smug. "Lisa's been through this before. 3 times, in fact. 2 failed engagements, 1 annulled marriage. All men with significant financial means. And in each case, she walked away wealthier." I leaned back in my chair, letting the information sink in. So she's not just after him emotionally. "Oh, honey," Martha said, "she's playing a long game. And Daniel is walking straight into her net." The knowledge was a weapon, sharp and precise. I didn't need to use it yet, I just needed to know it was there. That Friday, I decided to push him further off balance. I planned it meticulously. Dinner with friends he disliked. Wearing a dress he used to call dangerous. My phone lighting up with messages I didn't bother to hide. He came home to find me laughing on the couch. A half-empty wine glass beside me. Music playing low. "Going somewhere?" he asked, eyeing my heels. "Yes," I said simply. "Don't wait up." For the first time in months, I saw it, the flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. Not guilt, not remorse, but the dawning realization that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one with options. The following day, the war shifted. It was noon when Lisa showed up at the house. No warning, no pretense. She stood in the doorway, all polished hair and designer perfume, her smile brittle. "Is Daniel here?" I stepped aside just enough for her to see the empty hallway behind me. "No, he didn't tell me you were coming." Her eyes darted past me, scanning the house like she expected to catch him hiding in a corner. Then she smiled again, too brightly. "Well, maybe you and I should talk." I considered it. Part of me wanted to shut the door in her face. Another part, stronger, wanted to see what she thought she could gain by standing here. We sat in the kitchen, sunlight spilling across the table. She folded her hands, the diamond bracelet on her wrist catching the light. "I'm not here to fight, Claire. I just think we should be honest with each other." "Oh, yes, Daniel and I, well, things are serious, and I think it would be better for everyone if transitions were smooth." I stared at her for a long moment. "Transitions," I repeated. She nodded, like she was offering me a business deal instead of dismantling a marriage. For Emily, especially, that was her mistake, bringing my daughter into it. My voice stayed calm, but my words landed like stones. "Emily will be fine. And as for you, Lisa, I think you're overestimating your place in this." Her smile wavered. Meaning, I said, leaning forward. "That men who cheat for you will cheat on you. And Daniel is no exception." For a split second, the mask slipped. I saw the calculation in her eyes, the math of risk versus reward, security versus instability. Then she stood, brushing imaginary lint from her dress. "We'll see." Yes, I thought. We will. That night, Daniel came home furious. "What the hell did you say to her?" I met his anger with an infuriating calm. Nothing she didn't already know. He stormed upstairs, muttering under his breath, and I smiled to myself, because the cracks were spreading faster now. The next move would be mine, and it wouldn't just shake him, it would bring the whole facade crashing down. I'd been planning it for weeks, every move calculated with the precision of a chess master setting up the endgame. Daniel thought he was untouchable. Lisa thought her polished smile and diamond bracelets could blind the world. Tonight would prove them both wrong. The setting was perfect. The Chamber of Commerce annual gala, an event Daniel adored because it made him feel important. He'd been attending for years, using it to schmooze with investors, pose for glossy photographs, and remind the community that Daniel Mercer was a man of influence. This year, he had a +1 that wasn't me. I declined the invitation. When he'd first mentioned it, my tone airy and unconcerned. That was part of the trap. He thought I was stepping back, licking my wounds. What he didn't know was that I'd secured my own invitation through Martha, whose husband sat on the board. Not only would I be there, but I'd be armed with something far more devastating than a cutting remark. I hadn't worn it in over a decade. A floor-length, deep crimson gown with a low back and just enough shimmer to catch the light with every step. It was a dress Daniel once told me was dangerous because it made other men look at me. Tonight, that was exactly the point. I paired it with diamond studs, not flashy but elegant, and swept my hair into a loose chignon that gave me the kind of confidence armor I needed. One last touch, a silver clutch containing a USB drive. On that drive, the curated slideshow of Lisa's past, a neat collection of public records, engagement announcements, annulment filings, and property transfers. Every one of her previous relationships documented in black and white. It wasn't gossip, it was truth. And it was going to play on the massive projection screen in the ballroom before the night was over. The valet's eyes widened slightly when I stepped out of the car. That gave me a small rush of satisfaction. Inside, the grand hall was already buzzing. Crystal chandeliers threw warm light across tables draped in white linen. Each centerpiece an explosion of white roses and gold ribbon. A jazz quartet played softly in the corner, and waiters glided between guests with trays of champagne. I spotted Daniel almost immediately. He was standing near the bar, laughing too loudly, his hand on the small of Lisa's back. She looked like she'd stepped out of a high-end fashion magazine. Sleek black gown, hair in perfect waves, a diamond necklace catching the light. Daniel's smile faltered for just a moment when he saw me. Lisa turned, and I watched her eyes flick over me in quick appraisal. I knew the exact thought going through her mind. She's not supposed to be here. I crossed the room with slow, deliberate steps. Daniel, I said, my voice warm but edged in steel. Lisa. Daniel recovered quickly, forcing a grin. Claire, I didn't know you'd. I got an invitation, I said smoothly. Wouldn't miss it. Lisa's smile was tight. You look different tonight. I tilted my head. So do you. Though I suppose black is appropriate for any kind of funeral. Her eyes narrowed. But before she could respond, one of Daniel's colleagues appeared, clapping him on the shoulder. Mercer, they're about to start the slideshow. You're in a few of the photos this year. Perfect. The ballroom dimmed as the MC took the stage, welcoming everyone and running through the evening's agenda. Daniel and Lisa drifted toward the center, where a crowd gathered to watch the annual Year in Review slideshow, a montage of local events, business highlights, and charitable work, all projected on a massive screen above the stage. I slipped away to the AV booth, my heels clicking softly against the marble floor. The technician barely looked up when I leaned in, offering a sweet smile and a flash of my gala pass. There's been a small change to the order of the slides, I murmured, handing over the USB. Board approved. They wanted to add it at the last minute. He shrugged, plugged it in, and queued it up without a second thought. By the time I returned to the floor, the first few minutes of cheerful community photos were playing. Children at summer camp, ribbon-cutting ceremonies, gala snapshots from last year. People laughed and pointed when they recognized themselves. Then the screen flickered. A title appeared in elegant script. The Many Lives of Lisa Harrington. The first slide was her engagement photo, with a man named Thomas Avery beaming smiles, the kind you'd expect from two people in love. A caption at the bottom read, "Engaged, 2011. Engagement dissolved, 2012. There was a pause in the crowd's chatter, a small ripple of confusion. The next slide. Lisa in another photograph, this time with a different man, a champagne flute in hand. Married, 2013. Annulled, 2014, gasps now. Daniel stiffened, his eyes snapping to Lisa, her face drained of color. The slides kept coming, each one a different fiancé or husband, each followed by a legal record of separation, annulment, or settlement, property transfers, bank withdrawals, a timeline of calculated exits, all tied neatly together by the fifth slide. The whispers had grown loud. People were turning to look at her, at Daniel, at me. The final slide was the most damning. A recent photograph of Lisa and Daniel, taken at Monroe's, smiling at each other over wine. Beneath it, current project, Daniel Mercer, estimated completion, TBD. Silence hung for a heartbeat. Then, like a match to dry paper, the room ignited murmurs, sharp intakes of breath, someone's nervous laugh. The MC scrambled to cut the feed, but the damage was already done. Lisa turned to me, eyes blazing. "You." I raised my glass. In a mock toast. Smooth transitions. Remember? Daniel didn't make it through the rest of the evening. He grabbed Lisa's arm and practically dragged her toward the exit, ignoring the stares, the murmured comments that followed in their wake. I stayed exactly where I was, smiling politely when people came up to express their surprise. The beauty of it was that I hadn't lied. Every word, every image, every date on that slideshow was verifiable. She could try to spin it, but the seeds of doubt had been planted. And in Daniel's world, doubt was poison. By the time I got home, my phone was buzzing. Texts from mutual friends, a voicemail from Daniel, his voice low and furious. "You've gone too far this time, Claire. You'll regret this." I listened twice, then deleted it. It wasn't total victory, not yet, but it was the first major blow, and it had landed exactly where I wanted it to. Lisa's perfect image now had visible cracks. Daniel's confidence was shaken. The people who once looked at him with admiration now had questions. And I slept better that night than I had in months, because this was only the beginning. The fallout began before sunrise. By the time I woke up the morning after the gala, my phone was already buzzing with messages, not just from friends, but from people I hadn't spoken to in years. Some were concerned, some nosy, and a few just wanted to make sure I'd heard the news. The news was everywhere. Photos from the gala, grainy phone videos of Daniel's red-faced outburst, whispers of marital discord that the local gossip blogs had already inflated into tales of embezzlement, infidelity, and corporate betrayal. The video of him slamming his drink down mid-speech had gone viral on a small business forum. The comments mercilessly dissecting his tone, his arrogance, and, worst of all, his choice of words when he'd tried to save face. People like me don't answer to nobodies. I was one of those nobodies now, apparently. Daniel called me at 7:15 a.m., his voice sharp and hoarse from too much whiskey and too little sleep. "What the hell did you do?" "I think you mean, what did you do?" I said, calmly sipping coffee. "You were the one yelling like a cornered animal in front of half the city. This isn't a joke." "Emily," he snapped, "I have 3 calls with major clients today, and 2 of them are already hinting they might reevaluate our relationship. You think this helps anyone? You think this helps our daughter?" Our daughter. He always pulled that card when He wanted the moral high ground. The conversation spiraled. Him accusing, me deflecting, until I hung up on him mid-sentence. The satisfaction of that click was a small flame in my chest, but it burned steady by mid-morning. The first crack in his empire widened. A former client posted a vague but pointed statement on LinkedIn about the importance of integrity in leadership. Daniel's name wasn't mentioned, but anyone in his circles knew exactly who it was about. At lunch, I met with a friend who still worked in PR. She slid her phone across the table. A forwarded email from one of Daniel's board members to the rest of the team. Subject line, urgent. Damage control. They're in panic mode, she said, lowering her voice. Your husband's about 3 bad headlines away from losing his majority backing. Ex-husband. I corrected, even though the papers weren't signed yet. At home that evening, Emily hovered in the kitchen doorway, twisting the cord of her hoodie. Mom, people are talking. My friends saw the video. Some are saying Dad's been cheating for years. Is that true? The question hit like a knife to the sternum. I wanted to shield her, but the truth was bleeding into the open whether I liked it or not. It's complicated, I said, carefully. Your father made choices that hurt us, but you're not responsible for his mistakes. She studied me for a long moment, then whispered, I wish you'd just tell me everything. And oh, I wanted to, but revealing the full scope of my plan would risk everything, not just for me, but for her too. So instead, I hugged her, promising that one day she'd understand. That night, I sorted through the folder I'd been building for months, the one marked insurance. Inside were bank statements, contract scans, and an unassuming flash drive I'd retrieved from a storage unit Daniel thought I didn't know about. I hadn't even plugged it in yet. I wanted the right moment. The right moment came faster than expected. 3 days later, Daniel announced a strategic media partnership meant to rehabilitate his image. A live interview on a popular local news show. It was a gamble, the kind that could either make him look like a misunderstood visionary or bury him completely. As he spoke on camera about misinterpretations and family misunderstandings, I was across town in a quiet office, watching the contents of that flash drive spill onto my laptop screen. Emails, contracts, photos, a trail of private deals and offshore accounts that made my skin crawl, and one name that made my heart pound. Lisa, not just as his mistress, but as his business partner in at least 2 shell companies. The cracks in his empire weren't cracks anymore. They were fault lines, and I was holding the match. Daniel's PR stunt detonated in real time. Within hours of the interview airing, social media lit up with side-by-side screenshots. His claims about open books alongside leaked excerpts from the very documents I now possessed. I hadn't even leaked them myself. Someone else in his circle clearly had access and no loyalty left. By the next board meeting, the air in the conference room was a cocktail of aftershave, stale coffee, and thinly veiled hostility. I wasn't invited, of course, but I was nearby, thanks to a sympathetic board member who slipped me a pass to the adjoining observation room. Through the glass, I watched Daniel sit at the head of the table, jaw tight, suit immaculate, but his eyes flicking nervously from one face to another. Gentlemen, he began, this company has thrived because we've stood together through what? Interrupted a tall, silver-haired man I recognized as one of his oldest investors. Through your reckless personal behavior, through the kind of financial games that can land all of us in front of a federal judge. Daniel's face blanched. The meeting unraveled from there. Accusations, demands for transparency, Veiled threats about votes of no confidence. Lisa sat 2 seats away, her expression unreadable. But when Daniel glanced at her for support, she looked away. By the time the board adjourned, I could see the sweat darkening the fabric at the back of his collar. Later that night, Lisa made her move. I got the message via an untraceable email address. We should talk. He's going to drag us both down. When we met in the dim corner of an upscale bar, she was all cool poise and calculated charm. He's finished, she said simply. But if we play this right, you and I could both walk away with what we want. I didn't trust her. Not for a second. But I listened. She wanted access to certain accounts I now controlled. In exchange for her testimony about his financial misconduct, it was tempting. Tempting. The day we were supposed to finalize the deal, Daniel called Emily. Not me, Emily. She came to my office afterward, pale and shaking. He said, you're trying to ruin him. That you'll ruin us too. Did you believe him? I asked quietly. Her eyes shimmered. I don't know what to believe anymore. That night, as I prepared the files for transfer to Lisa, I hesitated. Handing them over would end Daniel, but it would also bind me to her in ways I couldn't predict. In the end, I made my own play. I released just enough of the information to the press to spark a full investigation, but not enough to point directly back to me. The morning the headlines broke, local mogul under investigation for fraud and racketeering. Daniel's name was everywhere. His phone was seized, his accounts frozen, and Lisa's photo appeared beside his in more than one article. I expected satisfaction. I got something colder. 3 days later, an envelope arrived at my door. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper, a list of dates, transactions, and one grainy photo of me meeting Lisa at the bar. At the bottom, a note. Everyone has secrets. Yours are next. I stood there, the paper trembling in my hands, realizing the game wasn't over. It had just changed players. And somewhere in the city, someone was already moving the next piece. Chapter 11. The last card. The envelope sat in my hands, like it had weight far beyond the paper inside. Emily's gaze stayed fixed on me, her brow furrowed, a question hanging on her lips that she didn't quite want to voice. The room felt suddenly smaller. The late afternoon light fractured by the blinds casting long shadows over the kitchen table. We had just spent weeks dismantling Daniel's empire piece by piece. Yet the unease curling in my stomach now was sharper than anything I'd felt during the fight. This felt personal. Emily finally broke the silence. Are you going to open it? Her voice was steady, but I caught the flicker of apprehension behind her eyes. I nodded, my fingers sliding under the flap. The paper tore too easily, a sound far too loud in the quiet. Inside was a single sheet of crisp white paper. No letterhead, no signature, just one line, written in neat, deliberate handwriting I recognized instantly. You think you've won. You haven't. My chest tightened. I had seen that handwriting before. Looping letters and precise spacing. Lisa. Emily tilted her head, trying to see. I folded the note in half and slipped it back into the envelope. It's nothing important, I said quickly, but my tone betrayed me. Her eyes narrowed. Mom, she said slowly, you've been straight with me about everything else. Why not this? Because I didn't want her tangled in this any more than she already was. Because the thought of Lisa still playing a game in the shadows after all this time made my skin crawl. And because deep down, I knew this was a challenge. One last move in a game I thought was over. I stood, grabbing my coat. I need to handle something. The trail wasn't hard to follow. Lisa wasn't as clever as she liked to believe. A favor from a friend at the post office confirmed the envelope had been mailed from a small boutique stationery store across town, the same boutique where Lisa had once dragged me during our brief, awkward attempts at friendship before I knew who she really was. The place smelled faintly of lavender and printer's ink. The clerk, a young man with tired eyes, confirmed without hesitation that a blonde woman, mid-30s, designer coat had purchased the exact stationery 2 days ago. I didn't need a name to know. I found her in the place I least expected, the rooftop bar of the same hotel where Daniel and I had once celebrated our anniversary. She sat at a corner table, drink in hand, sunglasses perched high on her head, watching the city lights flicker against the dusk. She looked untouched by the chaos of the last few weeks. If anything, she looked satisfied. "Well," she said as I approached, her voice honey with mock sweetness, "you found me faster than I thought you would." I sat down across from her, not bothering to return the pleasantry. Why, her smile deepened, like a cat amused by a trapped mouse. "Because, dear, you took something from me. I wanted to remind you that victories are temporary." "You have nothing left," I said flatly. "Daniel's broke. Your little social throne has crumbled. And yet," she interrupted smoothly, "you're still here, chasing me down, instead of celebrating your big win. That means I still matter." It wasn't just arrogance. It was calculation. She wanted me off balance, second-guessing, wondering what she still had in her hand. I leaned in. "If you think you can scare me, scare you?" She laughed, low and amused. No, I just want you to know I'm not gone. People like me, we don't disappear. We wait." Her words hit harder than I wanted to admit, because I'd been telling myself this was the end, that we'd stripped Daniel's life bare and left nothing for either of them. But Lisa wasn't Daniel. She was a different kind of predator. I stood, tossing a few bills on the table. "Wait all you want, Lisa, but I promise you, if you ever come near me or Emily again, you won't like how it ends." She tilted her head, the picture of fox innocence. "We'll see." 2 days later, I got a call from one of Daniel's former business partners, a man who'd kept his distance during the implosion but clearly had been keeping tabs. "He's gone," the man said simply, packed what he could and left the state. No forwarding address. The news didn't feel like victory. It felt quiet, empty, like the storm had passed and left a stillness I didn't quite trust. Emily came home that evening with takeout and a small bouquet of daisies. "Thought we could celebrate," she said, setting them on the counter. She didn't mean Daniel's disappearance. She meant us. The survival. The fact that after everything, we were still standing. Over dinner, she asked, "Do you think Lisa will really come back?" I hesitated, then shook my head. "No. She thrives on an audience, and she's lost that. She'll move on to someone else." It was half a lie, half a hope, but Emily smiled like it was enough. That night, I burned the envelope and the note in the fireplace, watched the paper curl in the flames, the words blacken and disappear. Some battles didn't need to be fought if you refused to step into the ring. Months later, life had settled into something almost ordinary. I started a new consulting job. Emily was making plans for her own apartment. The house no longer felt haunted by his presence. One Sunday morning, while sorting through the mail, I found a postcard tucked between bills, a picture of the city skyline. On the back, just 2 words in that same looping handwriting: "Still here." I laughed, not because it was funny, but because it was the clearest reminder I could get that some people never really leave. They just fade into the background until they're bored enough to strike. I tore the postcard in half, then in half again.